Rose and welcome back to Cheap Lazy Vegan and another mukbang. Today you're watching another episode of Munching Mondays, which is my mukbang series. Mukbang is an eating show, so we are going to eat together and we're going to chat. So if that is your thing, then don't forget to subscribe to my channel and thumbs up this video. So today's menu is, I'm so excited. So we have here one of my absolute favorite dishes of all time, which is black bean noodles, also known as JJAJANGMYEON. You may have heard of Korean black bean noodles before. I just made it. I made it myself. Okay, I did. And then I also made, this is a vegan kimchi hot dog. It is fully loaded and it's gonna be delicious. So these two dishes, the recipes can be found in my Everyday Asian Recipes ebook, which is available on my website, or you could get it now through the plant-based bundle. The plant-based bundle has been relaunched, my friends, and it is available again for a limited time. This time though, I featured two of my recipes ebooks. My Everyday Asian Recipes ebook, which is my second ebook, and my very first Cheap Lazy Vegan Recipes ebook. So the plant-based bundle is basically a gigantic bundle of a whole bunch of ebooks and guides. This time there's over 130 different plant-based ebooks, yes my friends, and it is sold at a massive discount of only $50. And this is basically 99% off. If you bought every single ebook and course separately, it would cost you over $3,500 US. And just my two ebooks alone that are included in this bundle, if you bought them on my website, it would be $39. So for an extra like $11, you can get so many more ebooks, and it is such a good deal, you guys. So definitely check out the plant-based bundle. The info is down below. It is available for a limited time. The sale ends on November 27th, so definitely check it out. And the last time I did the bundle, I featured my other ebooks, so this time you'll get different ebooks. So definitely check it out. The recipes for these two will be in my Everyday Asian Recipes ebook, and the bundle is available until November 27th and only $50. Link is below, my friends. Link is below. All right, guys, so now it is time to dig in. So we have jjajangmyeon here. Let me just show you the beauty. Ooh, do you hear this, guys? Guys. Black bean noodles. This is my favorite noodle of childhood. Why can't I speak English? This is my favorite noodle dish from childhood. Look at this. Woo! It is glistening. All right. First bite of jjajangmyeon. Oh my gosh. And if you are going to make this, if you want to make it like even tastier, but like slightly less healthy, just add more oil, add more sugar. But you don't need to, it's still delicious. Pickled radish, also known as 단무지. This is a must with the black bean noodles. You can get the pickled radish in Korean supermarkets. Oh my god. I have a spoon. Guys, it's been so long since I had jjajangmyeon. This dish is so popular in Korea. It's everywhere. You can order delivery. Like back in the day when I lived in Korea, when I was a kid, it was one of the few foods that you got delivered, right? Because you know, like here, it's like pizza was like the food that you would normally get delivered, and now you can get anything delivered. In Korea, like jjajangmyeon was one of like the main things that people got for delivery. And yeah, it's a very cultural dish. It's a cultural dish. Next, I'm gonna have a bite of this gigantic kimchi hot dog. See, the only issue with this thing is that it is very gigantic. Hopefully it's not too messy, but let's see. Ooh. Oh my god. Guys, why is food so delicious? You know, I think my worst nightmare would be losing your taste, or losing my taste, or losing appetite. Oh my god. You know, You know, there's people out there that don't have much of an appetite. Okay, cheers. You know, and it's like, I will never understand the lack of appetite because I've always had such a strong appetite. I've always loved food so much. Okay, look at it. I don't know if you can see the inside there. Oh, it's gonna be messy. Now it's messy. My God. It's messy, but it's so good. I mean, obviously none of us, I mean, all of us have a strong appetite, whoever's watching this video. Because I feel like if you watch mukbang videos, like, it probably means you love food. But I just know that there are people out there that just eat to survive, you know? They eat to live. And in some ways, you could probably be super healthy if you don't have, like, you know, too much of a love for food. But then I'm like, oh my God. But like, do you enjoy the joys of food? Guys, what should I talk about today? For people that have not tried those, it's very hard to describe the flavor. It's very, very, very savory, slightly salty, almost like a soy saucy taste, but not really. I wouldn't say it tastes burnt. It just tastes very savory, very, oh, I don't know how to describe it. It's so hard. To drink, I have some kombucha. I'm like obsessed with this kombucha right here. Ginger lemon. It's very delicious. I mean, I like most ginger kombucha. But this one is like only 5 calories per can. I mean, most kombucha is like not very high in calories, but I've got a little glass here with some ice. Ooh. So I wanted to talk about life in Canada today, okay? Pros and cons. My thoughts about living in Canada. Maybe that's an interesting topic. Do you care? I don't know. But you're gonna watch anyway, right? Hopefully. Ooh. So life in Canada. Okay, if you are Canadian, leave a comment below if you agree, disagree with my opinions. So first of all, okay, I think it is very important to recognize that when it comes to like places to live, countries, cities, this just went crazy, okay? It is so subjective. Like opinions are very subjective. Some of it's based on objective reality, but basically like what we prefer and what we look for in like a city to live or a city to visit is very, very subjective. Oh my God, so messy. Oh my. What are my thoughts? The thing is, so lately I've been seeing a lot of people complaining about Canada and, you know, Canadians being like, I need to leave Canada. Canada sucks now. Oh my God, fuck Canada. So I do want to know, like, depending on where you live, right? Whether or not you live in Canada, let me know where you live, and let me know if you feel this sentiment toward your own country as well, because I don't feel like it's a Canadian specific thing, because the cost of living crisis is all over, right? It's not just Canada. Like the UK, I keep hearing about in the UK, it's like there's a huge cost of living crisis. People can't afford anything. Basically, like most places in Europe, I mean, everywhere seems to be struggling. So I don't necessarily know if this is like a Canadian issue, okay, where people want to leave their country, or is this like just a universal thing where you just feel like we're all just being squeezed, you know, because that probably is more so the case. So I think people that live in Canada maybe don't realize that, you know, a lot of places in the world are also struggling. And the thing is, from a Canadian's perspective, people are like, oh my God, I need to leave, I need to leave. And it's like, okay, most of these people that complain, these people that are complaining about cost of living here, which I think is a fair complaint, you know, groceries going up, rent is crazy, you know, housing market's insane. I understand all of those things. So they complain about that, and then they'll move to like Mexico. And they'll be like, look how great everything is here. Look how amazing. It is so cheap. Look at all of this amazing stuff. This weather, I mean, to be fair, the weather, I'll take that, okay? But it's like, because you're Canadian, you have the opportunity to move to other countries that aren't as like affluent. So then your dollar is going further. You have more of a chance and more of those opportunities. So of course, when you go to a country that is developing versus developed, of course, if you go to a country where the currency isn't as strong, or you know, things aren't as expensive, it's going to be easier for you. But how is it going to be for the local population? How is it for the local population? I saw this one guy that was like, you know, yeah, complaining about cost of living in Canada. Again, fair assessment. And he was talking about like somewhere in Canada where it's like so expensive because all these people move here to do this, and then that drives up the cost, and therefore the local population can't, you know, afford to live in this region because everyone's, you know, moving here and they've driven up the cost, which is a fair assessment for a lot of places in Canada. But then he like moved to Mexico and is like, look how cheap it is. Oh my God. Look at this beautiful like condo that I got for like this much money. It's so cheap. And it's like, don't you understand you're doing the same thing to the local population that you're complaining about? So it's like, you're just like kind of, because you have the chance to go kind of like, what's the word, like lower economy, of course you can live like a king, right? Like it's kind of like, you know, self-awareness, please, self-awareness. So I don't know how I got into this tangent. But basically, I just want to know like what you guys think of where you live. If you live in a developing country, or maybe you live in like somewhere in Europe, I don't know, depending on where you live, let me know what your thoughts are in your current situation. So here's the thing with Canada. We're such a big country geographically, but there aren't that many people living in this country, especially compared to the geography of it. So there's like a ton of land, and there's only like a few major cities because there aren't that many people that live in this country. If you look at Canada as a whole, it's gigantic, okay? It's the second biggest country in the world geographically, okay? It is huge. It is huge. So when people are like, oh my God, I'm visiting Canada, will you be around? And I'm like, okay, well, you're going to Toronto, which is basically like a 4-hour flight. So it's like essentially a different country. So geographically, it's huge, but population-wise, I think we definitely have less than 40 million. Let me see, what is our population currently? 38.25 million, so a little less than 40 million. And to put things into context, South Korea, where I'm from, the population is like 50-something million, okay? And the size of South Korea is way smaller than my province here in Canada. So you can see the population density is so low in this country, okay? But like most places in the world, like most countries, most of the population is sort of concentrated in a few cities, right? So in our country, because our population, like for example, in America, the population is like 10 times Canada, okay? But we're like geographically larger. So in America, there's like a lot of major big cities, right? Obviously there's like the biggest ones, but then there's like, I feel like there's like a lot of major cities. Whereas in Canada, there's only like Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, I guess Calgary, And then like, yes, there's Quebec City and there's like a few other cities, but it's like there's only like a few major cities, and that's where like the most people live. So those places are becoming very expensive because even when people move to Canada, I think most of them try to go to one of those cities. Anyways, I don't know what my point is of this conversation, but so the major cities are becoming very, very expensive. Calgary is the new addition to this expensive thing because, you know, up until just like a couple years ago, it wasn't as expensive, and now like the prices have just completely skyrocketed because a lot of people are moving here because Toronto and Vancouver are way too expensive. So, I don't know what my point was with that conversation. I guess I'm supposed to talk about pros and cons. One pro, I mean, I guess you could look at it as a pro or a con, is that we have so much land and so much space, and yet not that many people. So there's just a lot more opportunity for people to build things here. There's also a lot of natural resources here in Canada. Lots of natural resources, which just makes it easier for Canada to be like more of an affluent country. We've got oil and gas, we've got like, I don't know, like clean water supply, and also just nature is beautiful here. I live right by the Rocky Mountains, which is arguably the most gorgeous mountains in the world. And you know, we've got lakes. I mean, we just have a very large natural landscape, which is beautiful. And because we're a country that is so large and not many people, we do allow more immigration, although I don't know if we've cracked down on, you know, lowering the immigration rates, but it's just a lot easier to move to Canada, like immigrate here, which is why probably a lot of people do decide to move here. Another very big pro of this country is multiculturalism. We have a large amount of multiculturalism in this country. That doesn't mean there's no racism. There's definitely racism here. We're all just a bunch of immigrants living in this, you know, very, very baby of a country. So yeah, multiculturalism is definitely a huge plus in this country. If you go to most major cities here in Canada, you will find all different types of people, okay? We've got like Europeans of all kinds, Asians of all kinds, people from Africa, people from South America, Central America. We got, you know, like everyone, okay? We got people of all different colors. We got the spectrum of colors. Yeah, multiculturalism is a very big thing here, and I do feel like Canada, compared to the US, is slightly less racist. Definitely less racist than America, I think. Although we do have a very bad history with how our government and our society has treated our Aboriginal friends. So there's definitely racism here, but I would say compared to the US, which I don't know if that's a good comparison, it's not like as rampant as other countries. Systemically, there are issues with racism, especially toward the Aboriginal population, which is obviously awful, which needs to be fixed. But in my experience from everyday kind of life, like from everyday day-to-day human interaction, I don't really experience racism, although I will say that I do have the privilege of speaking English, right? Like I speak English pretty much perfectly. Like I speak English, so I feel like I don't get treated as like a foreigner. I do think there is some like, what's the term? Xenophobia, where like if you don't speak English, there needs to be a term for this. Is there a term for this? Where it's like if you're not as good at speaking English, then they will look down on you kind of thing. There's definitely a little bit more of that rather than like, oh, you're Asian, so like, you know, like ew, you know, it's rather, oh, you don't speak English, like what's wrong with you? That is more prevalent, I think. Like people just looking down on you because you don't speak English. And I'm like, excuse me, bitch, what languages do you speak other than English? Oh. When you eat jjajangmyeon, you definitely need a spoon. Because you gotta scoop out. Or what a lot of people do, you eat the noodles and then you have all the solids and the sauce left. You add rice, mix it up. It's so good. Anyways, so what was I saying? Oh yeah, racism and stuff. So I do feel like it's less than other countries, especially like when I travel is when I notice it most. Like when I go to Europe, that's when I realize, oh my God, like I am different. Like people treat me a little bit differently here. Like, or they will yell, you know, I mean, again, this has gotten better since the first time I was in Europe. The first time I was in Europe, you know, like every 2 seconds, I mean, this still happens. People yell, konnichiwa, ni hao. And it's like, oh my God. I'm sure every Asian has experienced this. So yeah, multiculturalism, open-mindedness, I think is a bit higher here. And because it's multicultural, you know, individualism is a little bit more celebrated. You being different is not necessarily seen as like super weird or bad. You're just different because everyone here is different. Like no one is the same. Everyone looks different. So it's kind of embraced a little bit more, I think, than other cultures. And one thing that's interesting about Canada versus the US, because a lot of people, obviously we get compared to the US, we you know, we speak English just like the US and all that stuff. So we do get compared. I think one interesting fact is that the Canadian model, in terms of like how we deal with the multiculturalism, is that we are more of a mosaic model, okay? Meaning that we kind of see everyone as like their own culture. Canadians are kind of told to embrace their original culture, but then we all kind of just fit together in our society as Canadians, but we're not like mixing everyone up, which is what the American system is, which is the melting pot. So American system is the melting pot, which is like everyone, no matter what culture, no matter what race, no matter what background, you all come together and then you all just mix together as Americans. I mean, again, this is just like a theoretic view of how our countries are structured. Obviously, this doesn't mean that if you're American, you have to like let go of your individual culture. But I think in America, maybe there is a little bit more of a pressure if you come from a different background to kind of fit in more so to the American standard of whatever America means, right? Whereas in Canada, it's more so like our entire point of Canada or being Canadian is that we're all kind of different. We all come from different backgrounds, from different cultures. So I think that's quite nice. Although it does have some drawbacks, I think. I think one of the drawbacks of the mosaic model, this could just be because Canada's still like a new country, is that I do feel like there is a little bit lack of what it means to be Canadian. There's not really like a cohesive Canadian identity other than like our multiculturalism. So I do think there's like lack of that because we're all just kind of like, you know, embracing our own cultures, which is great, which I think is a wonderful thing. But I think there is kind of an unspoken division between the different cultures and backgrounds. And there's no sort of cohesive idea of like, this is what's Canadian. You know what I'm saying? But again, that could be because Canada is like technically a very young country and most people here are immigrants. So we're just kind of like very new and we're trying to figure out what the identity is. Like, For example, what is Canadian food? Answer me that, other than poutine. You know, I don't even like poutine. I know, I'm a bad Canadian. I mean, poutine's okay. It's not like I dislike poutine. I just think it's too greasy. It gets soggy very quickly. I don't understand. Other than poutine, I really can't think of anything that's considered like Canadian cuisine, you know? But again, maybe after many years, we will have developed some level of more of a Canadian culture, right? What do you guys think? Do you think I'm wrong? Let me know. Now, there are Canadians that have lived here for a few generations. A lot of European Canadians that have lived here for many generations. not many generations, maybe like 3 or 4 generations. And so those people are probably like the most Canadian, but then I don't really know how to relate, right? Like, of course I relate on like a human to human basis. And in some ways, you know, if we met outside Canada, we would bond as Canadians. But in terms of, you know, culturally, do we have similarities? Not really, you know what I mean? This is what I mean, right? Whereas like, there are very specific aspects of Korean culture where I'm like, this is Korean food, this is how Koreans do this is Korean this is Korean that. Whereas like Canadians more like, oh, we're just really nice people. Very interesting. So I think one great thing about all of that, again, is that we're very much free to embrace our own culture and our own traditions from wherever we're from, since we are basically a huge country full of lots of immigrants. So that's one great aspect. But one kind of negative aspect of that is that it doesn't feel as cohesive as like a Canadian unit, if that makes sense. I feel like I'm just going off on tangents and I'm not really, you know, talking about the pros and cons of Canada. So I think, okay, so major pros of Canada, or living in Canada: multiculturalism, slightly less racist than most places, embracing individuality, all those great things. I think standard of living in general, again, a lot of people might disagree with this, but again, compared to other places in the world, standard of living in Canada is still generally higher. Again, it's changing, not in a good way. But my parents moved here about 20 something years ago and they started from scratch. They didn't speak English. They had to build everything from scratch, and that was possible. Now it might be more difficult. I will admit this, okay? But I do think maybe, I don't know for sure, compared to other places, it's still a little bit easier to make a decent life for yourself, even if you weren't a super rich person. So the income disparity is still, I think, compared to, again, other places, it's still a little bit smaller. And even if you were living slightly like, you know, below average salary, you could still, if you were good with your money and finances, and if you lived in a moderate area, you could still kind of live a decent life here. Whereas I think in many other countries, that might be more difficult. But again, these are just kind of like my perceptions. And again, this is getting more and more difficult as, you know, the economy gets shittier and shittier. So yeah, standard of living is still relatively high compared to other places in the world. We have very little corruption in this country. So I think we are like number 2 least corrupt countries in the world. I believe number 1 is Switzerland, and I think number 2 is Canada, which I believe. The one thing we have is very little corruption. I'm sure there still is, but compared to other places, very little corruption, which trickles down to, you know, higher standard of living. Because when you have a very corrupt government, generally for regular population, that equates to like, you know, a lot of other problems, such as lower standard of living, things like that. I do think, again, compared to other places, we are a little bit safer still, although it is still getting worse. We are changing in the worst directions, my friends. I don't understand what's going on. Compared to other places, we do have less crime. In terms of like every day, do I generally feel safe? Yes. Like I will go to a cafe, leave my laptop on the table, go to the bathroom, do all kinds of stuff. Like I would never do that in other places, and I probably shouldn't do that here either. Generally, there's a little bit more of like public trust, maybe. I do think it's a little bit safer, but again, it's getting worse. Homelessness is definitely on the rise, and it has gotten severely worse in the last like probably 5 years or so. So there is definitely a rise in crime, a rise in, you know, lack of safety, things like that. So it is unfortunately getting worse, but again, I think compared to a lot of other places, it is still one of the safer countries in the world, okay? There's also, in terms of, I don't know if this is related to corruption, but in terms of like regulations, safety regulations, you know, public safety, public health, public kind of protections, I do think generally, again, we are better than a lot of other places. For example, if something is being built here, like if a building is being built here, I probably know without doing much research that it's probably going to be relatively safe. You know, there's going to be safety protocols, there's going to be people checking for all of these things, making sure that everything is being built to code, which can be kind of annoying if you are trying to build something, I'm sure, but it's to protect public safety. So I think that kind of stuff is more taken seriously, whereas I think in other countries, a lot of it maybe due to corruption, or just like, I don't know. Yeah, usually due to corruption, like the government isn't as on top of public safety, following things to code and things like that. So little things that we take for granted here in Canada, other countries might ignore a little bit more. Because I've lived outside of Canada and because I'm also from Korea, there's things that I realize that people that may have been born here may not know, you know, because they've never lived somewhere else. I think that, you know, it's easy to complain about Canada, which again, there are legitimate complaints to be made. But I think when you leave Canada is when you really realize like, oh, we have it pretty good in Canada. Mm-hmm. The one thing I remember when I moved to the UK, that's one of the first things I was like, oh my God, I didn't realize how comfortable we have it in Canada. Everything is so comfortable in Canada. Everything here in the UK is a little bit uncomfortable. Now, what are some cons? It's obviously cold. Although I will say, I think a lot of people think that Canada is just cold all the time, okay? We do have 4 seasons, technically. And thanks to global warming, our autumn and spring seasons are slightly longer now. Do you guys notice that if you're Canadian? Because I feel like back a few years ago, you'd have maybe 2 months of summer, maybe like 1 month of spring, 1 month of fall, and then the rest is like basically winter weather. So the winter was very, very long. But now I feel like probably because of global warming, our summers are longer. And we have, like, I've been noticing that we have a longer fall. Usually it just goes from like summer to like maybe like a couple weeks of fall and then it's like winter, okay? But now it's like our falls are longer. So it really does feel like we kind of do have 4 seasons, but our winters are very cold. So that's one big con. A lot of people don't like winter here, which I understand. I understand. A lot of people don't like winter, myself included. Not a big fan. So yeah, the weather can be very cold and very unbearable sometimes. But we do technically have 4 seasons, so that's one thing to note. What else? What's a con? I think Canada in general is boring. That's probably my biggest complaint about Canada is that it's boring. That is my biggest con of Canada. If it was a little bit more exciting, if it was a little bit more fun, then I think I would have very little complaints about this country. But to me, just generally, it's just boring. Okay, there's lack of, even when you are in a big city, I feel like the most interesting city in Canada would be like Montreal. That's my opinion. I think even Toronto is kind of boring. Okay, I know that's my controversial opinion. Vancouver, so boring. Woo! I don't know what it is. I think, you know, I don't know. I don't know why. I don't know why we're so boring. Okay, we are boring. Another thing is that because we're such a big country with very little people, it's very hard to get around, okay? You have to fly everywhere. Flights are very expensive, although nowadays it's getting a bit cheaper, I will say. Thanks to finally some budget airlines in Canada, it is getting a bit cheaper. But in general, just like traveling within Canada, you have to fly everywhere. If you drive, it'll take forever. So like just, it's hard to kind of get around in Canada. If you're traveling in Canada, I would stick to either East Coast or West Coast. Like pick one, okay? Or do like a long trip and do a couple weeks in the East, maybe a couple weeks in the West, whatever, okay? It is not easy to move around Canada, okay? That's just the, you know, geography, logistics, okay? So yeah, I think my biggest complaint is that it's boring. Okay, and I think part of it is that it's a safe country. Sometimes safer countries are a bit more boring. You know, there's a lot of rules, regulations, like you can't drink on the street. They're very strict about that stuff, which is a good idea because it's safe. But does it make it less interesting? I don't know. What do you guys think? But if you love the outdoors, that's the thing. If you love the outdoors, Canada is perfect for you, okay? If you love mountains, you love lakes. If you like beaches, definitely not Canada, okay? But yeah, what else? What else, guys? What else? I'm sure I missed a lot of things. Okay. Yeah, I think the biggest thing about Canada though right now, the biggest problem is that We don't have that many big cities, or just big cities in general, okay? Like, I feel like where I live, Calgary, is I think the 4th biggest city in Canada, which has, let me see. Although I will say, I think this is one of the fastest growing cities in Canada. Hold on. Largest cities in Canada by population. So Toronto's the biggest, Montreal is the 2nd biggest, Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton. To give you an idea, the population of Calgary, which is the 4th biggest city in Canada, is only 1.3 million. That was in 2021, although that probably would have increased. So about, let's say 1.4 million. That's the 4th largest city in this country, okay? I feel like that's not a lot of people. And the thing is, here in Calgary, the population is very spread out, okay? So we have very low population density. So it doesn't, to me, it doesn't feel like a big city. It just feels kind of like a small city or like a big small town. To me, that's what it feels like, or a big town, I should say. If you're from like a really small town in Canada, then Calgary might seem like a big city. I forgot the point of this of this conversation. Oh yeah, so I think the biggest con would be that any big cities, most big cities, are gonna be way too expensive. So that would be a big problem. It is very expensive to live in a city, you know, and Calgary is getting more and more expensive as well, okay? Because of the boom in the last, not the boom, but like the population boom in the last couple years, because Toronto and Vancouver is basically like too expensive. And it's like, why pay that much to live in Toronto, which is not even that interesting and it's boring. It's just like not worth the price. You know, if I want to pay that much, I want to live in like a really interesting city. You know what I'm saying? Guys, I feel like I did not have a coherent thought in this video. Let me know what your thoughts are. I should have like written a list of pros and cons. It was a very disorganized kind of word vomit sort of video. A lot of people ask me, where would you live if you could live anywhere in the world? And I genuinely just don't have an answer, okay? Because every place has its pros and cons. And as much as I like to complain about Canada and how boring it is, which is true, it's, I think, still a relatively okay place to live. Yeah, I don't know where else I would live. But would I stay here if my family and friends weren't here? In this city? No. I probably would live somewhere else. I definitely would, actually, if I didn't have my family and friends here. But I think ultimately, where your family and friends are is very important, okay? Anyway, now I'm rambling again. Hopefully I made some sense in this video. I feel like I need to do a proper list, pros versus cons. I would love to know if you guys, if any of you live in Canada, if you agree with any of the things I said, or if you disagree. I'm sure there will be some differing opinions and that's okay. But yeah, let me know what you guys think of my thoughts on Canada, pros and cons. Yeah, and of course, let me know, you know, where you live, what you like about where you live, what you dislike. Would you ever want to move to Canada? Because I know a lot of people are interested in moving to Canada. Because that's another thing, guys, okay? Us Canadians, we complain, but so many people want to move here. And there is a reason. Like, my parents moved here. They gave up everything, they dropped everything, and they moved here. There is a reason for that. Anyway, enough rambling. Thank you so much for watching this video. Thumbs up this video, and of course, subscribe to my channel. And guys, don't forget to check out that bundle, the plant-based bundle. The link is down below for you to get over 130 ebooks and guides for only $50. And again, the recipes for these 2 dishes that I demolished will be in my Everyday Asian Recipes ebook. So definitely check that out. And thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!